So Jim Ferrell is the mayor of Federal Way, Washington. He's running for King County prosecutor. He wants to be the prosecutor at the King County headquarters in Seattle, Washington, and prosecute crimes and be the lead enforcement of the law for the people. The problem is, as a mayor in the city of Federal Way, Jim Ferrell has approved of an anti-father, anti-family, which means anti-children, fascist police force and enforcement. While at the same time, he won't enforce laws unless his city makes money off of that enforcement, which means that when men are a victim of a crime, he won't enforce it, even when it's overwhelmingly obvious. And I'm going to show you these couple of things, and I'm going to give you some documentation to prove the utter incompetence of Jim Ferrell, or total disregard for the law, and the culture that he creates for his own city. And if he has a fascist-like mentality in his own city, and he won't prosecute crimes equally among genders, how much more, or his prosecutor in his city isn't going to do that because of the culture that he creates. How much more is he going to be an inept, incompetent, and or fascist prosecutor for King County over the greater Seattle area? Let's check this out. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to go over the policy of Federal Ways Police, which is overseen by Jim Ferrell, which I complained about 2 years ago. And a guy called me and asked my opinion about these problems, and he supposedly was investigating, and nothing came of it because they don't care. Because I'm just a piddly little taxpayer citizen who's resided in Federal Way for about 36 years off and on, and they don't care because it's not a moneymaker. All they care about is making money for the city. I've had my own interactions, and those of you who know my father's rights page, I've been a single custodial father of my daughter for 18 years of her life, and a couple years after that, she's continued to reside with me and rely upon me. So I'm not coming from a place where I hear some stories from somebody else. I'm talking about my own interactions with the police, my own interactions with the prosecutor, and then also interactions that I've seen that I'm going to give you some documentation for. So, remember, Jim Ferrell oversees the city of Seattle. He's the mayor. Now, the prosecutor has discretion whether they prosecute crimes or not. The police go out and nab people, and they decide whether they forward information to the prosecutor. But the culture that Jim Ferrell has created has made this an ugly situation. So let me start, first of all, with a couple of interactions I've had with the police, okay? There was a guy that I was working with who was a 50-50 co-parenting father. He was a co-custodial father. He had 50-50 that he fought over and over again for visitation with his kids. So he was an every other weekend dad at first. The mother accused him of being abusive and things like that. There was an incident where the mother attacked him, and he had bite marks on his back. Now, if he was the abuser, just think about this. You got a person here and a person here. If this person is the abuser, how does this person get behind the person and have bite marks on their back? The wife was the attacker in this situation, and the Federal Way Police did nothing about it. Then, after this guy overwhelmingly proved that he was a good father, he got 50-50 visitation. It might have been 1 week on, 1 week off. I think it was maybe a 3-4 day split, and they flipped it around. One day the mother said, oh, he's abusing the kids or sexually abusing the kids. I don't know what the exact report was, but he called me and he put me on three-way because the Federal Way Police, Jim Ferrell's police, were knocking at his door and said, the mother is accusing you of abuse. Hand the children over. We're going to take them to CPS. Now the father presented them with the court order. And here's what I did. He put me on three-way. I said, hey, number one, do you have a warrant to come into his home? No, they did not. Mr. Federal Way policeman, do you have a writ of habeas corpus that allows you to extract the children by court order? No. Do you have probable cause if there's a crime that's been committed? No. Has there been a crime committed that you know of? No. And so what they did was they said, well, it's federal way policy that just in case something happens, we yank the kids. So this guy already went through due process, already went through allegations in court, and a judge in King County Superior Court or a family law commissioner ordered that he gets 50-50. And these fascist cops come in and say, we're going to just yank your kids just because the mother gave us a phone call. The mother who's already lied about you before, who victimized you, and you're the victim of assault in the past. You've already vindicated yourself in court, but that's not good enough because the federal way police, we trump court orders. We are greater than court orders, and we, as our own little kingdom in federal way, have a policy that if you're accused of something, just in case something happened, we're going to yank your kids. And you know what we're going to take them? We're going to take them to CPS, where they're more likely to get abused or molested than they are with you or with the mother. This is the insanity of Jim Ferrell's City of Federal Way. Okay? Now, I'm not going to disclose that guy's name. You just have to trust me with that. But I'm going to go on to the next one where there was a similar situation. I told the cops, if you take those kids to CPS, there's a greater likelihood they'll actually get molested. And this guy's been vindicated. And you're sellouts to fathers, families, and children. You're sellouts to your own genders, especially if you're fathers yourself. And they ended up taking the kids back to the mom because I'm actually surprised they didn't hang up on me on the phone. So, example number one, Jim Ferrell's City of Federal Way and the police, and I guess the prosecutor doesn't mind the police going over there and violating people's rights. The prosecutor represents the people and prosecutes crimes, but they're advocates for the people. They should be prosecuting the cops for violating people's constitutional rights and taking kids in violation of a court order. That's the crime of custodial interference in Washington, RCW 9A as an apple .40. That being said, I'm going to go on to example number 2. Here's an example where, let's just get right to the person who was the most evil person in all this. Detective Martin Leddy or Leedy. I think his name is Leddy. I talked to this guy directly. So Detective Martin Leddy was assigned this case. This dad was accused of molestation. He not only went through a court hearing for temporary orders, he went through a full-blown trial in front of Judge Maureen McKee in King County Superior Court, and he got unsupervised overnight visitation, and the mother accused him of domestic violence and things like that. Matter of fact, I'm going to show you a court order from that case in which the mother had been accusing this father of domestic violence. And then when she finally got an attorney, the attorney convinced her, hey, look, you need to drop this. You don't have a case and you're lying and I'm not going to help you lie. So if you look here, there's a dismissal. There's a denial order dismissing her request for a domestic violence protection order. It's an agreed dismissal with prejudice. You see that? With prejudice. That means she can never bring it up again. So she agreed, I will never accuse this father of committing domestic violence against me ever again because I don't have a case. So it's not only dismissed and dropped, it's dismissed with prejudice. I can never bring it up again. So Shorty has a history of basically, she's admitting that I falsely accused this father. But Detective Martin Leddy in the Federal Way Police Department, that's overseen by Jim Ferrell and the City Council of Federal Way, this guy gave legal advice to the mother and the father, saying the father's visitation is suspended, told the father, don't go pick up your kids, and told the mother, don't allow any contact between the mother, the father, and the children. Now, when this Detective Leddy is telling the mother to violate the court order that's in place and telling the father to surrender his time, there's a court order that gives him time with his kids, and he's saying, I'm advising you that you have to surrender that. That's the crime of practicing law without a license or unauthorized practice of law. I forget the RCW. I'll probably put it up on the screen when I edit this video. So Detective Martin Leddy got a call. They said that, and I'm going to show you the police reports here. When I edit this later, I don't know what exactly how I'm editing it, but I'll show it and I'll do some voiceovers and stuff and be talking about this. But the Federal Way Police, Ferrell's fascist Federal Way Police, got a call from a mother who has a history of admitting that she lied and dismissing her own claims with prejudice. The father goes through a full-blown trial, gets court-ordered visitation. She calls the police and says, oh, he's molesting the children. Big time lie number 2, after he's got court-ordered visitation. Martin Letty tells him his visitation is suspended and tells the mother, here's my legal advice for you. Even though I'm not an attorney, I'm going to commit a crime of giving you legal advice and telling you don't hand the children over. That being said, I call the Federal Police Department and Martin Letty picks up and I say, hey, Mr. Letty, why are you telling the father that he doesn't have any visitation? And then he says, well, Federal Way protocol says that, just in case something happens, just like the cops told me before, in case something happens, we have to exercise precautions and take the kids away. I said, but he has court-ordered visitation. He already went through a full-blown trial. And then Martin Letty says, well, there's a law that says his visitation is suspended. I said, oh, yeah? Really? You're citing a law? Which law is that says a court-ordered visit is suspended as soon as somebody else calls and accuses them of something? So he has a court order. The mother calls the Federal Way Police and says, hey, I'm accusing him of this. You don't have any proof that he did it. And you're saying there's a law that there's a court order, that a court order will get suspended. And Martin Letty says, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not talking to you. I'm hanging up the phone. And he hangs up the phone. So Federal Way Police will tell you, oh, there's a law or there's a policy out there. Or we have this, we don't even have probable cause. We have just in case something happened cause, which where's that in constitutional case law? So Martin Letty, this self-righteous, condescending, arrogant prick who thinks he's, God's gift to saving and rescuing women and children from abusive men, declares that visitation is suspended after full-blown trial. So this guy went months while there's an investigation without seeing his kids because of arrogant pricks like Martin Letty, who is a detective at Federal Way Police, which is overseen by the city council and Mayor Jim Ferrell. This is the culture in Federal Way. You can go and yank kids away from a father immediately and threaten to put them in CPS custody where they'll more likely get abused than not or messed up in the head. They will yank and traumatize kids and take them away from their parents after a full-blown trial. That's like let's say you're accused of murder and you're vindicated and you're found innocent. Federal Way Police will go and nab you and throw you in jail for that murder that you've been vindicated of. That's the insanity of the culture in Federal Way that Jim Ferrell has created. Why would you vote for him as prosecutor if he's going to just start yanking people away as soon as they're accused of something without probable cause or things like that? So anyway, we have documentation here. I'm going to show you the incident report in which Detective Martin Letty writes down in the incident report, I told the mother not to let the children have contact with the father. Here we go right here. Okay? So take a look at that where I'm highlighting this part. And then the father goes months without seeing the kids. And then guess what? It's referred to DC, what's the new abbreviation for CPS? It's DCYF, which is a totally corrupt, messed up entity. Now, there's some good social workers in there trying to do the right thing, but it's totally corrupt. They make the state makes $15,000 every time they take a kid away from parents. So that's why they're all over this, because Jim Ferrell and Martin Letty would love to make money from the state and have kids taken away in their fascist dictatorship in the city, in their jurisdiction. So this intake report and the resulting report shows that there was no findings by the prosecutor. I think it was King County prosecutor and DCYF. So two entities investigated. It turns out there was nothing. So these guys harass this guy in violation of due process. He already had his day in court, and then they yank the kids away, traumatize the kids, traumatize and disrupt the family, all because Martin Letty is some self-righteous, condescending, God complex having arrogant prick out there rescuing children with a self-righteous cause. He's just going to go round up kids every time a mother alleges something, even if the mother has a well-documented history of lying about the father in court action. And this is headed up by Jim Ferrell, the leader of the city of Federal Way. Now, I'll tell you about my own interactions with the police. So here's example number 3, my own interactions. As a custodial father, I went through an ugly court case. I got custody of my daughter when she was 7 months old. I've been raising her alone since then, okay? I did all the parenting stuff. I did this stuff. If I talk to the police, they're like, oh, you can't do that. Fathers can't do that. You know, even male police who are fathers who take care of the kids don't believe that fathers can parent kids for some crazy reason. So, because there's a lot of false allegations, the mother had a corrupt attorney and all that stuff, I would get, when we did visitation exchanges, I would get a civil standby. So I would call the police, ask them to come to the visit exchange, whether it was at McDonald's or whatever. A lot of times we use McDonald's. When the police would show up, I remember one time they showed up and they said, what's this all about? I said, I just want a peacekeeping visitation exchange, civil standby, just to keep the peace. And my reason behind that is if there's police there and they write down that we did a visitation exchange and nothing happened, then the mother can't falsely accuse me of anything. So it's kind of a cover for mine. But the police would always walk in and walk up and say, well, you better be on your best behavior. You could lose your visitation. They presumed that I was a non-custodial parent. I'm the one who called. I'm the one who asked for the request. I start explaining it to them, even though I tell them kind of the circumstance. They got such a mindset that men can't have custody and can't raise daughters or can't raise girls, or a white man can't raise a biracial child, which I did for basically 21 years. She's still dependent upon me. You know, millennial kids aren't like, it's not like the 60s when people were getting married at 16 and 17, or the 50s, people get married at 16 and 17 and buying homes and, you know, doing the American dream and white picket fence and stuff. You know, these kids are a little different, so they're a little more reliant upon us. But the cops would do stuff like that. And the cops would advise me all the time and give me legal advice, which is a criminal act by the police. One time I didn't hand over my kid because the mother was, when the last time we had a visit, the mother's aunt hung up the phone and blocked me from contacting my child. And I'm everything that she's ever known. So we went to court later on contempt on that. But the police went out of their way. Like, if a guy calls and says, hey, the mom's blocking me and won't let me talk to my kid or won't let me see my kid, the cops will say, go do contempt. I'm not going to do anything about that. But if a mother calls and says, oh, I'm not seeing the kid, the cops will try and bully a man into handing over their kid. Even though the cops can't enforce a civil order. You know, if you win a lawsuit against a doctor for $10,000, you can't say, oh, I need you to go shake down the doctor for me and give me my money. The cops will not enforce a civil order. That's a civil order. A doctor lawsuit, a family court case is a civil order. Until it gets to the point, like in states like Washington, where you have a crime like custodial interference. But my point is, the way the cops treated me like a second-class citizen, and here I am raising my daughter. In this day and age of everybody telling dads to step up, once you step up as a dad, they still treat you like crap because of this bigotry against fathers. And it's often by fathers. You know, if this Detective Letty is a father, he's a sellout to our own gender too. And he's propagating the bigotry by being a sellout. You know, I mean, think about it. Think about during slavery times. Who was the biggest sellouts during slavery times? It was the house slave who was in there cooking and cleaning and getting a nice bed and then going out and whipping the slaves or shooting and killing them when they ran away. Here's some fathers working for the police department, taking kids away from children and yanking them away and traumatizing them because a mom just gives them a phone call. Or talking to me like I'm some second-class parent or I'm nobody and I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm raising the child without the mother's help for years. So there's a culture in the city of Federal Way propagated from the top down. Jim Ferrell, the city council, the prosecutor's office, and the police department, and detectives within the police department like Detective Martin Letty, all think fathers are subhuman pieces of crap and second-class citizens that can be stomped on and crapped on. And they talk to you like crap, and when you say, oh, by the way, what law are you talking about? They say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm hanging up on you. You're not a lawyer, but you'll give legal advice to the mom to withhold the children in violation of a court order and tell a dad to stand down and don't exercise his time, or you'll go in and just start, like Gestapo police, just going in there without a warrant and yanking kids. In the first example I gave you, I said, what if the father doesn't hand over the kids? What are you going to do? We're going to arrest him. So under the threat of arrest, they don't cite any crime. I said, what crime is he committing? They're saying, no, we can't say. He's accused of this. I said, do you have probable cause? And they said they didn't. So they were going to make a false arrest and falsely imprison him. But that's the culture that Jim Ferrell has created in Federal Way. That's the culture of the city council. You should never vote any of these city council subhuman pieces of garbage back in. And I'm going to show you at the end the names of everybody, or you can go to the City of Federal Way. There'll be a link to the City of Federal Way to look at all the people to vote out now and never let them hold office again. They're a disgrace to humanity, families, and worst of all, disgrace to children. They're a bunch of child abusers because they will yank kids away from their father, which is the most important thing in their life, outside of food, water, and air, and a relationship with the mother. You can't name anything more important. And all of society is crying out for fathers to be involved. And here goes the police yanking fathers away just because of a conflict or a false allegation. And these were proven to be false allegations because the first example, the 50-50 custody dad, still ended up with 50-50. The dad who went through trial and got every other weekend, he went through a DCF YS investigation and a prosecutor investigation, and they found nothing. Yet the Federal police, they come out unscathed. They just traumatized a bunch of kids and families and went in there like Gestapo police trying to yank them away. And then when I look for some simple service, just do a civil standby, keep the peace, and then make your notes and walk away, they got to say, well, if you do this, you're going to lose your visitation, or watch out for this. So one time I did withhold the child because, again, the mother's sister was blocking my access to a phone call with my daughter. Last time they had a visit, and the mother had visits like a couple times a year, went 1.5, 3, 5, and 7 years without seeing my daughter at all. So I was holding down the fort the whole time, 24/7 for most of the time. And then there was this interference that went on with them, and we went to court on contempt on dealing with it. But the mother called the police, and they come to my doorstep looking for me, and I'm out with my daughter somewhere. And then I get a phone call from them, and he advised me that I better hand over the kids or I'm going to probably lose my visitation. He again assumed that I'm a non-custodial parent. And then he gave me legal advice, which is a crime. It doesn't matter if practicing law without a license is a crime. In Jim Ferrell's City of Federal Way, cops can do it all day long. And then they can violate your due process rights and then falsely imprison you and yank your kids away in violation of Troxel versus Granville. You have a right to autonomy with your kids without government interference. But in Federal Way, they can come and yank kids whenever they feel like it because Detective Martin Letty says there's some law out there somewhere. But if you ask him, what law is it, Mr. Letty? He hangs up the phone in your face because you know what the hell he's talking about because he just pulled that law out of his anus. Dumbed down, airheaded, moronic, pathetic piece of subhuman garbage. These people, they're to protect and serve. And I respect the police and all the stuff that they have to go through. And I also respect the fact that they get phone calls for a bunch of petty baby mama, baby daddy drama all the time that turn out to be nothing. But these guys here in our city, they're over the top with it. And they're outrageously lawless about it. They should just let this stuff go or start an investigation, but they turned Gestapo and they get a God complex and they're going to go and rescue and come. They're going to play White Knight and in shining armor and come and puff out their chest like, look at all these children that I saved. Look at how wonderful of a detective or police officer I am. Where do they get the legal authority to do that? Is it in the law? Is there probable cause? Do they have a warrant? Do they have writ of habeas corpus when they go in here and do this stuff? No. It's Federal Way policy. Now, Martin Letty thought he was going to blow me off and he's talking to some stupid idiot because he's got a badge and he brags about 20 years of police work. And so he's puffed up in the chest, and because he has a badge behind him and he can carry a gun, he can boss people around. People get, now there's some cops that I know that are great cops and they have a public service mentality and they understand people's due process rights. This guy thinks because I've been bossing people around, he got that egomaniac, megalomaniac God complex where he's going to talk crazy to you. And if you confront him on it, even nicely, I asked him, okay, there's a law. Where's that law, please? And he hangs up on me with an attitude. So this culture is created by Jim Ferrell. Why would you want a fascist to be a prosecutor? Now, let me transition into another case, which I'm dealing with right now. Now, Jim Ferrell may be a fascist on one side of the spectrum, but when it comes to women who are violent against children and their boyfriends and who are an actual threat to commit murder or assault, Jim Ferrell doesn't care. His police don't care. The prosecutors don't care. You know why? First and foremost, the Violence Against Women Act gives federal funding to the states to protect women and children. Even though women commit 50% of domestic violence, 60% of child abuse, according to the government's own statistics, Jim Ferrell is all about making money. And so is the prosecutor of Federal Way. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of the prosecutors in Federal Way so that you can see who's not doing their job and not society from criminals and violent people. You know, remember, the prosecutor represents the people. The people want criminals off the streets or to get rehab or to get punished or held accountable so they can get treated or fixed. The prosecutors in Federal Way don't care if they're women. If women are violent or abusing kids or abusing men, they don't care because they don't get Violence Against Women Act money. So if a prosecutor, let's say a prosecutor does a domestic violence case or a child abuse case or molestation case, they will get Violence Against Women Act money from the federal government. Just like when they yank kids away and take them to CPS or DCYF, if they go to foster care, the state gets $15,000 worth or more money from the federal government. So your federal taxes go to the federal government and turn around and are sent to our prosecutors if they prosecute a man for domestic violence or child abuse, not a woman. It's the Violence Against Women Act. And it's actually kind of bigoted and prejudicial that it's only against women. So Joe Biden passed it in 1994 when he pushed it, and when he was a senator. 20 years later, when it was up for renewal, Joe Biden was like, people are saying that women falsely accuse men of domestic violence and abuse. That's totally bizarre. Even though it's well documented by lawyers, judges, the documentary Divorce Corp. If you type in Divorce Corp, false abuse claims, and I'll put the link in here, maybe some of these stupid jackasses in the city of Federal Way, from Ferrell to the prosecutor to Detective Letty and these police, will realize that women lie about this stuff all the time for leverage in custody cases. Everybody knows it. Lawyers know it. Judges know it. How come these idiots don't know it?
Because there are so many incentives to lie in court during a divorce, people often make up false abuse charges.
I got a lot of those that happened right at the top of divorce action when both people were in the house and one person wanted to get the other person out of the house.
It may be that, in fact, there is no violence, but they make it up because they've talked with their friends or they've gone to a lawyer who said, well, make it up, and if you really do a good job, then you can get him kicked out.
It's really a travesty the way the system that it was designed to protect women from domestic abuse, to protect children from abuse, to protect children from sexual abuse, a system that was set up with every good intention, that was set up to protect those who needed it, has been allowed to be subverted so that false accusers really are able to gain so much by making the false accusation.
To learn more shocking truths, see Divorce Corp the movie, coming to theaters this January.
So, I have a case in which I was dating I dated a girlfriend off and on for a year. She totally played me. I got suckered. That's not the point. I was stupid. I'll admit that, okay? This is going to look really stupid on my part. But I thought this lady was a damsel in distress. She was a friend for 8 years, a casual friend. We got really close, and then we started dating. But she had targeted me to play me, okay? And so what she did at one point when I finally broke up with her, I realized she was mixing pain pills for a surgery on her arm with alcohol. So I told her dad and a cousin and a friend, you guys may want to do some intervention. So last time we talked and hung out, she found out about that, and she told me, and I'm going to show her text message right here. Her name's Lorena Harris out of Renton, Washington, and this may be a good warning in case any guys are watching this and considering dating her, because she's out there on the prowl looking for a guy to be her main supply. Well, I found multiple guys in her phone when her phone went off in my car, and I was trying to shut it down, and multiple guys popped up. Other people have told me she's been dating multiple guys, and that's how she lives. She commits welfare fraud, and the welfare system investigated her and is letting her live in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment with just her and her 5-year-old. So she's currently ongoingly committing welfare fraud and has been gypping the taxpayers for a decade at least. That being said, when she found out, I told her family, you might want to consider intervention. She's abusing her kids. She's mixing pills with alcohol. She's getting out of control. She's threatening me. She's dating multiple guys to get money from them. And she's just spinning out of control. And she reminded me of a family member of mine who died before age 50, abusing alcohol and drugs and living a crazy lifestyle, who I loved very dearly. But, so in parting, I would say you guys may want to do this. And the cousin wrote back to me and said, yeah, she's kind of a hopeless case. There's nothing I could do about it. I'm powerless. I tried to reach out. Her dad's sick of her antics. So they all agreed with me. Yet this woman said, in a text message, you better watch your back out here. You're going to get effed up. You're exploiting me or whatever. So she got offended at that, like most people who are drug addicts or abusers or alcoholics. So I get a protection order against her. Since that time, she's violated my protection order 5 times. I told the Federal Police on the first incident. She contacted my daughter, who still lives with me, who's 21. She contacted my daughter and started bashing me to my daughter. My daughter doesn't want to talk to her. My daughter barely had a relationship with her. There's no reason for her to contact me. Lorena was served a temporary protection order that I got before we had the full hearing. Some of you may know, you go to court, get an emergency order, and then you have what's called a show cause or return hearing. You come to court so the other side has their due process right to defend themselves. So I had a temporary order, and then we had a full hearing. In between there, she's still restrained, just like it's a final order. She contacts my daughter. She can't contact me through a third party. My daughter lives with me. Obviously, she's trying to trigger me and contact me through her. Federal Police didn't care. I reported it to them. Didn't care. Now, the new law in the state of Washington says, and I didn't find this out till later, it says if an officer has reason to believe that there's probable cause that somebody violated a protection order, they must arrest them. I got her. They told me send the cell phone screenshot, and here I'll show it on the screen here. Send it to us. Now remember, this is the culture passed down from Jim Ferrell. We only want to prosecute men. We don't care about women who commit crimes because we don't make any money off of that. So Jim Ferrell is running to be the lead prosecutor in the greater Seattle area for King County. And all he's going to care about is if he makes money. He doesn't care about fairly prosecuting crimes and putting the bad guys away. But if women falsely accuse men of stuff, he's going to yank kids away. Okay? And if women commit crimes, he's not going to prosecute them and hold them accountable. So, men, it's kind of role reversal from like Farrah Fawcett's, the day and age of the 70s, the burning bed Farrah Fawcett, where women were abused and they couldn't get no recourse. Now, when men get abused, they can't get any recourse because the cops will laugh at you, suck it up. I've heard all kinds of stories like that. As a matter of fact, I went to a King County sheriff deputy and I said, what do you think about my case with Lorena? My current case. I'm back on that. He said, well, that's an automatic arrest. I said, well, my city, they won't arrest her. He goes, well, sometimes you're dealing with gender issues depending on the police officer. So the county sheriff admits that there's gender discrimination in enforcing the laws. And our culture in Federal Way, topped off by Jim Ferrell, the city council, and his prosecutors, and his detectives and police officers, they don't care. This first violation, the first 3 violations were never passed along to the prosecutor. So, in my case, this lady threatened me with a threaten, you'll get effed up, better watch your back. Now, the reason that that's a legitimate threat is because she has a history of violence. She swung a tire iron at her ex-husband at a visitation exchange, punched his babysitter, and punched his new wife. Now, that's how she got her arm broken, because the wife punched her back, dropped her, and she got her arm broken. Well, Lorena started it all. So she started the fight, and unfortunately, nobody wishes a broken, shattered arm on somebody. Now she's got a plate and screws in her arm, and she's been taking meds for it for 1.5 years, and I've been told by every medical professional that she must be an addict because nobody takes meds that long. So this woman, Lorena Harris, threatened that I need to watch my back, and I will get effed up out here, okay? That's a threat to assault somebody or have them harmed. And since she swung a tire iron or a deadly object at her ex-husband's head, fortunately she missed, since she did that, and she was at his apartment raising hell, demanding her children, starting a fight, she started a 1-on-3 brawl. Since she was doing all of that, then that's a legitimate threat for me to, get this domestic violence protection order. So then when she's talking to my daughter, she's now a criminal. So then what Lorena did was she got mad and retaliated, and she started her own domestic violence protection order case against me, even though I've never harmed her, never hit her, never did nothing. And so she was saying I was butthurt and I'm being sensitive and being a crybaby because she went on a date with somebody else. Well, I found out she was seeing at least 4 different guys at the same time, including her previous boyfriend who beat her up in front of her kids, who she said raped her, and who she also told me may have molested her 5-year-old. And now she's back with that guy after I broke up with her, and her main supply, you know, if you read about narcissism, they have a main supply who's there to give them emotional support, money, and things like that. And then they have their fun, wild, crazy boyfriends on the side. So I was her main supply, I was gone. So now she goes back to this bottom-feeding, thirsty, rapist, pedophile, domestic violence perpetrator. And the Federal Police don't care about it. They think she's a wonderful person because she's a single mom, I guess. Also, as a side note, she had a teenage daughter. She has 2 teenage daughters and a 5-year-old daughter. I know I look stupid. She has multiple babies' dads. Like I said, it's not something I would ever just date it off right off the bat. We were friends for years. I believed all her victim stories. But this lady got in a fight with her 15-year-old. And as some of you may know, who are my audience on my YouTube channel, narcissists, if they were traumatized when they were younger and become narcissists, they don't have an emotional maturity past the age of a 12-year-old or 13-year-old. They can't develop emotionally because of the trauma they suffered. So this lady got in a fight with her 15-year-old, bit her in the neck and tore skin off, and punched her and gave her a concussion, or threw her and gave her a concussion. So she ran away to the ex-husband, where the other teenage daughters ran away. Now she has a 5-year-old at home by herself, and the 15-year-old used to look out for the child. So Lorena one time passed out, and her 15-year-old called me and said, James, my mom's passed out. She's been on the floor naked for 2 hours. I don't know what to do. So I said, check her vitals, blah, blah, blah. Where's your grandpa? You know, your dad? Have you called anybody? I'm the first person that she calls. And Lorena's passed out, and eventually she gets up and everything. I had to calm her down and stay in touch with her and things like that. So we have somebody who's mixing pills with alcohol, who's gotten extremely viciously nasty, violent with her own kids, with her ex-husband. She surrounds herself, like, I thought she was a victim of all these toxic relationships, and these, you know, side bottom feeder boys, you know, are, you know, she'd talk about being a victim of the boyfriend Brian who assaulted her, and she told me 3 different times, I hope to God Brian didn't molest my 5-year-old. I'm like, he wouldn't do that. He's not that crazy, is he? She's like, I wouldn't put anything past him. And now she's with him. So this is the type of person that the Federal Police and Jim Ferrell and his prosecutors believe, because she claims victim. So she comes to court to try retaliate against me and get her own restraining order. She's a no-show for her hearing. Then she files again. Then she's a no-show. Then she files again. And then we have a couple of continuances. So I was dragged into court for like 3 months. And then she was denied. Her case was thrown out. So I put a little pressure on the Federal City and Police Department and prosecutor and told them, hey, look, we have, at this point, we have, in September, we have 4 violations. So I told you she contacted my daughter. Then on August 20th, she calls me out of the blue. Why would this lady have my phone number in her phone to even accidentally call? It wasn't an accident. Then after the phone call, she texts me and says, damn, I didn't mean to call you. Now, if you accidentally call somebody, you know there's a restraining order, why would you follow up with a text message? Just leave it alone. And if the cops come knocking on your door, you can say, look, I butt dialed as an accident. But she went out of her way to text me. So then I wrote a declaration that she violated the protection order, and I put that in the court file of stuff we were going through. Then the next day at 1:20 in the morning, after she got served, the paperwork was dropped off at her home Saturday night. She was out with probably Brian, the pedophile, domestic violence perpetrating, you know, rapist. And she's forcing the 5-year-old to be around him. And that same 5-year-old, I asked her, you know, what do you think about Brian? She's like, he's a jerk. The first thing out of the mouth of babes, 5-year-old. He's a jerk. So anyway, that's the type of person we're dealing with. So after I write a declaration that she violated a protection order, she texts me at 1:20 in the morning on Sunday and says, you sick-minded little biatch. And then so I forward that to the Federal Police, and they don't do anything about it. And the prosecutor doesn't do anything about it. She got that one, the fourth one. That one looked more obvious. And you know what these stupid jackass police officers say? Well, we can't prove that that was her texting you from her phone to you. We can't prove who was on the other end. First of all, if you have a car accident and a hit and run and they evacuate the car and leave the car, or you find a gun at a murder scene, isn't the first person that you find as a suspect or the first lead, wouldn't it be to check with the owner of the gun or the car, or if somebody makes a phone call or sends a text message, isn't it the presumption that they're the ones who did it? I have a buddy who, he got a protection order against him. He went to the court to try and quash the protection order. And the clerks of the court said, you got to notify her of your motion to quash the next day. And he goes, but I'm not allowed to talk to her. And they said, you still got to notify her. So he followed their advice and he texted her. He said, I'm going to be at court at 1 in the afternoon tomorrow to quash your protection order. That's all he said. He was arrested in 3 hours. This lady contacted my daughter in violation of the protection order. She called me. Then she texted me. Then she texted me again with some vicious, hostile, harassing stuff. And they're sitting there saying, well, we don't know if it's her. And actually, after those 4 things is when I talked to the King County Sheriff. He said, oh, that's an automatic arrest. Federal Way, Jim Ferrell's City of Federal Way, prosecutor and police are all twiddling their thumbs like, I don't know about this. And then they actually, after I notify the city council and the prosecutor via letter as to what's going on, they're still twiddling their thumbs. They called Lorena in for an investigation. She confessed it in a court hearing that they called me in for an investigation and James is trying to get me in trouble and playing victim. They called her in and she probably said incriminating stuff, but she probably told them, oh, I'm trying to get a protection order against him. So they believed her little sob story and let her on her way. Guys, if that was you and me cussing out somebody that we're restrained from, I haven't contacted the lady other than to serve her court papers and respond to her paperwork. I haven't contacted her at all. And I'm a domestic violence victim because I have a domestic violence protection order. And these idiots are sitting here bending over backwards and defending her actions because they say, oh, we can't prove it. And they interview her and she's still walking the streets. Now, I don't necessarily want the lady to go to jail, but I want some kind of accountability. But Jim Ferrell and his prosecutor and his police don't care. And then I also sent them a video written confession where she said, oh, I saw James on this day and I videotaped him. And here's proof that he was over here in my neighborhood where I live. She's not allowed to videotape me. She confessed to a crime under oath in a court hearing, and I sent them the video. And now, if they don't do anything about it or prosecute her, they don't even care if a woman confesses to a crime. They'll say, oh, we don't have probable cause, or she made a mistake, or they'll bend over backwards. There's your City of Federal Way for you, their administration. The prosecutor, the detective, the police, and it's all headed by Jim Ferrell, who's running for prosecutor of the county. I would never vote for this guy. He's anti-father, anti-male, and anti-children. Make your vote. Be well informed.